a bronze eagle catches the blinding Mediterranean sun. Mounted on a wooden pole held by a Roman soldier, the others are standing in. And, in the narrow, shadowed alleyways behind the marketplace, young men with burning eyes silently drag sharpening stones. They are the undisputed heroes of the common people. They are the neighborhood teachers. They are the good guys. Jesus agrees with them on almost every major theological point. He preaches in their local synagogues. He eats the unleavened bread at their tables. He wears the exact same tassels on the corners of his cloak. He looks, talks, and acts like a Pharisee. The Pharisees watch him closely. They invite him in. They want a holy nation. They want the pagan disease washed away by perfect obedience. So they draw a heavy line in the sand. On one side is the clean. On the other side is the unclean. You stay on the clean side. You do not touch the leper. You do not eat with the traitor. You do not speak to the prostitute. The boundary is not a punishment. It is a protection. You survive a pagan empire by maintaining a perfectly pure identity. Jesus stands directly on the edge of that line. He looks at the men who have dedicated their entire lives to keeping God's law. He understands exactly what they are building, but he is about to tear it down. The conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees is almost universally misunderstood. We read the searing, explosive debates recorded in the Gospels, across the curved edges of hidden iron daggers. Same text, same God. 4 completely different ways to survive an empire. And we imagine a battle between 2 completely opposite religions. We picture a radical, loving outsider attacking a cold, alien establishment. We assume they fought so intensely because they had absolutely nothing in common. But that is the great misconception of the ancient text. The brutal arguments echoing against the heavy wooden beams of the village synagogues were not debates between sworn enemies. They were a bitter, agonizing family feud. When Jesus publicly calls them blind guides, when he points at their beautifully painted monuments and compares them to whitewashed tombs, hiding the deep, suffocating stench of dry, rotting bones, he is not yelling across a vast theological chasm. He is standing uncomfortably close. He uses their own rabbinic language, their own complex storytelling methods, and their own fierce reverence for the scriptures to entirely dismantle their worldview. The anger of Jesus is not the rage of a stranger. It is the heartbreak of a brother. The Pharisees had constructed their entire survival strategy on a single, desperate premise. They were not trying to be evil. They were trying to be fiercely faithful. They believed that if you built a thick enough wall of behavioral regulations, you could keep the toxic corruption of a pagan empire from leaking into your soul. They weaponized the ancient law to create a protective distance between the righteous remnant and the ruined masses. Their theology was essentially built. Most people read the Gospels and assume Jesus walked into a simple, two-dimensional world. We assume the landscape was neatly divided between the regular people, on a contagion model of impurity. If a drop of Roman filth, or a frantic touch from a diseased beggar, or a conversation with a known tax extortionist entered your orbit, you were instantly contaminated. Proximity to brokenness equaled spiritual death. You had to physically separate yourself, scrub the dirt from your forearms with cold water, and offer the correct prayers just to regain your standing before a holy God. The sickness always transferred to the healthy. The darkness always swallowed the light. Jesus does not disagree that the world is profoundly sick. He does not deny that the spiritual landscape of first-century Judea is infected. But there is a detail hiding in the text, a completely different mechanism of holiness that emerges the moment he actually steps across their carefully drawn lines. A man covered in the white, blacky, suffocating rot of leprosy falls forward into the dry dirt of a Galilean road. The crowd immediately scatters, pulling their heavy woven cloaks tight against their chests to avoid even a sudden gust of wind carrying his scent. You can hear the panicked shuffling of leather sandals backing away. The air goes completely, terrifyingly silent. According to the Pharisees, the physical space around this man is literal poison. According to the Essenes, who loved God, and the corrupt leaders who didn't, We hear the word Pharisee and immediately picture the cartoon villain of the New Testament, the obvious mustache-twirling antagonist. He is a walking corpse who must be quarantined in the deepest desert. According to the Sadducees, he is politically invisible and entirely irrelevant to the great temple machinery. According to the Zealots, he is useless for the coming holy war. Every survival strategy in first-century Judea demands that you step back. You protect the community by isolating the sick. You protect the holy by walling off the profane. Jesus does not step back. He does not recite a distant, sanitized prayer from the safe side of the street. He does not point the broken man toward the nearest cold ritual bath. He closes the distance. He reaches out his hand. He presses his bare skin firmly against the decaying flesh. According to every established rule of ancient purity, Jesus has just ruined himself. The contagion model is absolute. The sickness always transfers to the healthy, but a completely different kind of spiritual physics explodes into existence on that dusty road. The uncleanness does not infect Jesus. The holiness infects the leper. The touch is not a violation of the boundary. It is an invasion of the dark. This is what the separated ones could not comprehend. They believed purity was fragile. They believed holiness was like a delicate pane of glass, easily shattered by a single stone of sin, easily stained by the dirt of a broken world. Jesus operates as if holiness is a consuming fire, who hated everything good, everything pure, everything Jesus stood for. But if you look closer at the historical reality of the Roman boot on their necks, he walks straight into a funeral procession in the village of Nain. He touches the wooden bier carrying a dead boy. The uncleanness of death does not contaminate the rabbi. The life of the rabbi contaminates the dead. The boy sits up. He walks through a crushing, sweating crowd. A woman bleeding for 12 years reaches out and grabs the frayed tassels of his garment. The impurity of her blood does not drain his holiness. The raw power of his presence drains her disease. The bleeding stops. He walks right into the dining room of Levi, the tax collector. He eats the roasted lamb. He drinks the heavy wine. He breathes the exact same air as the political traitors. The corruption of the room does not pull him down. The grace of the table pulls Levi out. This is the fifth way. It is not the cynical compromise of the aristocrat. It is not the terrified retreat of the monk. It is not the bloody dagger of the rebel. It is not the anxious quarantine of the righteous. It is radical, contagious. Offensive grace, moving outward. Jesus clashed so violently with the Pharisees, not because he hated their desire for purity, but because they had dramatically underestimated the power of the God they were trying to protect. He did not come to guard the sanctuary from the sick. He came to tear the doors off the hinges. At the actual theology they were teaching in the synagogues, you start to see something the standard reading completely misses: to let the healing water flow out of the temple and flood the rotting streets. He proved in the dirt of Galilee that true purity does not need a fortress to survive. But 2,000 years later, we are still completely obsessed with the architecture of the walls. We are a species entirely obsessed with boundaries. 2 millennia have passed since the bronze Roman eagle threw its heavy shadow over the cobblestones of Jerusalem, but the human instinct for survival has not changed in the slightest. We look out at a modern world that feels increasingly hostile, deeply broken, and spiritually contaminated. We feel the exact same atmospheric pressure they felt in the ancient marketplace, and we respond by building the exact same 4 fortresses. The Sadducees still exist. They sit comfortably under the bright fluorescent lights of sanitized, wealthy auditoriums. They dilute the costly demands of the text, blending seamlessly into the cultural elite, deciding that a polite, politically connected institution is infinitely better than a radical, disruptive faith. The Essenes have simply changed their location. They no longer wander into the physical desert, but they retreat into tightly controlled ideological bubbles. They consume only safe media. They pull their families into insulated subcultures, and they lock the heavy deadbolts on their suburban doors, trying to wait out the cultural collapse in perfect quarantine. The Zealots are still fighting. They stare into the cold. blue glare of their screens. The Pharisees are not the obvious enemies of Jesus. They are the closest thing he had to peers. The real question of these ancient texts. Late into the night, they mistake rage for righteousness. They treat every minor cultural disagreement as a holy war, replacing the hidden iron dagger of the first century with a digital sword, absolutely convinced that God needs them to conquer the society by sheer force and fury. And then there are the Pharisees. They are still the good guys. They are the ones diligently studying the scriptures, attending every gathering, carrying the crisp pages of well-worn Bibles, deeply concerned with personal holiness. But they have drawn the exact same line in the sand. They define their faithfulness entirely by what they do not do, who they do not associate with, and the spaces they absolutely refuse to enter. This instinct to separate is not a defense of the gospel. It is a denial of its power. Every time a community uses its theology to distance itself from the brokenness of the modern world, it is laying another brick in the exact same wall the Pharisees built. It is operating on the exact same ancient contagion model of impurity, terrified that the darkness outside will somehow extinguish the fragile light held inside. The message of Jesus remains a terrifying proposition because it demands the complete dismantling of that wall. It asks the believer to trust that the grace they carry is infinitely more infectious than the sin they are trying to avoid. Isn't why Jesus fought with the Jewish establishment. It is this. Why did his most brutal, unyielding, heartbreaking conflicts happen with the exact? It demands that the healthy walk willingly back into the ward of the sick, unguarded and unafraid. But dropping these deeply ingrained defense mechanisms requires a profound shift in how we understand the final chapter of this story. The Sadducees compromised with a pagan empire and lost their massive stone sanctuary to the fire anyway. The Essenes retreated to the scorching sand and waited for a holy war that never arrived. The Zealots drew hidden iron daggers in the shadows, and the rabbi healed the severed ear. The Pharisees built an unbreakable wall of rules, and the Messiah walked right past the boundary. He touched the wooden bier of a dead boy, and life swallowed the grave. He let a bleeding woman grab his frayed tassels, and his sheer presence drained her disease. He pressed his bare hand against decaying flesh, and the holy fire burned the sickness away. Same world, same disease. One completely different cure. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the dining room of Levi, the roasted lamb, the heavy wine, the political traitors breathing the exact same air as the rabbi. Group of people who were trying the hardest to be holy? The answer changes how you read every argument, every overturned table, every tense. Not just the fact that Jesus was willing to enter that room, the fact that he was entirely unafraid of what the room would do to him. He did not sit at that table holding his breath, terrified of catching the corruption. He knew that the light he carried was heavier than the dark. If you are in a season where you feel deeply terrified of the culture around you, if you are exhausted from constantly measuring out the safe distance between yourself and the brokenness of your city, this is a place to breathe. You do not have to survive by building a thicker wall. You do not have to guard your holiness by running for the desert. You are carrying a grace that is inherently designed to move outward, a light that is infinitely more contagious than the shadows you are trying to avoid. And may the God who refused to retreat from a rotting world walk with you into yours and give you the absolute courage to reach out your bare hand. Conversation in the dust of Galilee. It reveals exactly what Jesus was actually building. But to find that answer, you cannot start with. He stands at the corner of a crowded marketplace in Jerusalem, his hand resting on the hilt of a short sword. The air is heavy. The men praying in the streets. You have to start at the top of the food chain. You have to look at the men, standing on the polished stone of the Temple Mount, watching the Roman eagle with calculating eyes. The first response to the crushing weight of Rome was not rebellion. It was realpolitik. The men standing in the high courts are the Sadducees. In the ancient Hebrew, they are the Tsadokim. The title traces its lineage back to Zadok, the legendary high priest who anointed King Solomon during the golden era of Israel. centuries before the Romans ever marched across their borders. They are the blue bloods of Jerusalem, the aristocratic elite, who control the vast temple complex, manage the national treasury, and dominate the supreme ruling council known as the Sanhedrin. To understand the Tzaddokim, you have to look carefully at what they do not believe. They only accept the first 5 books of Moses as binding, authoritative scripture. They reject the fiery visions of the prophets. They reject the desperate poetry of the Psalms. They completely deny the existence of a spiritual realm, the reality of angels, and any concept of a resurrection from the dead. When you hold all the wealth and all the political power in the present world, you do not spend your time longing for the next one. You can smell roasting lamb mixing with the faint, metallic scent of blood drifting down from the massive temple altars above. You do not need a Messiah to come down from the clouds and overturn the system, when the system is heavily tilted in your favor. For the Sadducees, God is not a father intimately involved in the daily, grinding struggles of a peasant. God is a cosmic landlord who expects his rent on time. As long as the ritual machinery keeps grinding, as long as the heavy bronze doors of the temple open on schedule, and the thick, pungent smoke of the morning lamb rises into the Judean sky, God is satisfied. Their alliance with the Roman Empire is not a betrayal of their faith. It is a preservation of their institution. They walk across the smooth, sun-baked marble of the upper courts wearing fine, imported fabrics. They negotiate tax rates and political appointments with pagan governors in the shaded colonnades. They believe they are holding the fragile nation together through sheer diplomatic pragmatism. They believe, deeply and sincerely, that a compromised temple is better than a burned temple. This is exactly why, for the vast majority of the gospel accounts, Jesus completely ignores them. He spends years walking the dusty, unforgiving roads of rural Galilee, eating with outcasts and touching the diseased, while the Sadducees stay perfectly insulated behind the massive limestone walls of the capital. They do not cross paths with this wandering rabbi until the final, explosive week of his life. You can hear the clink of foreign silver exchanging hands, the rhythmic murmur of ancient Hebrew prayers, the sudden, sharp bark of Latin commands, because they operate in completely different universes. Peace at the cost of purity is the oldest tax in the world, but for some men in Israel, the stench of this political compromise was too much to bear. When the spiritual center of your nation becomes polluted by foreign idols and corrupt priests, you do not stay and try to vote them out. You do not try to fix a rotting house. You walk out into the barren, blistering heat of the wilderness, and you start digging in the sand. The sun beats down on the salt-crusted shores of the Dead Sea. The air is heavy. The heat is merciless. A man in stark white linen walks out of a limestone cave. He holds a piece of coarse parchment. He steps down a flight of stone stairs into a freezing ritual pool. He holds his breath. He plunges beneath the surface. He comes up gasping in the quiet desert. He does this today. He will do it tomorrow. He will do it the day after. These are the Essenes. They look up at the mountain of Jerusalem. They see a rotting corpse. They look at the Sadducees in their fine, imported robes. They see illegitimate priests. They look at the daily sacrifices on the great bronze altar. First-century Judea is not a peaceful religious retreat. It is a military occupation. Walk through this city, and you immediately see the fracture lines. They see a system completely stained by Roman compromise. They cannot fix it. They will not join it. So they leave. They pack up their lives. They carry their sacred scrolls. They march down into the absolute desolation of the Qumran Valley. The wilderness is not a punishment. It is a quarantine. They build a fortress of purity in the sand. They share all their property. They refuse to own coins stamped with Caesar's face. They refuse to touch anything dead. They refuse to eat with anyone unclean. They wait for a cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. They copy the scriptures with obsessed, unbroken precision. The sharp scratch of the reed pen on animal skin echoes through the shadowed caves. They preserve the ancient words. They believe God will return to rescue Israel. but they believe he will only return to a perfectly pure remnant. Isolation is not a lifestyle choice. It is a theological weapon. You cannot catch the spiritual disease if you run as far as possible from the sick. You keep the darkness out by building a high enough wall. Jesus understands this impulse. His own cousin, John the Baptist, preaches in this exact same desert wilderness. He wears camel hair. He eats wild locusts. Jesus feels the exact same disgust for the hollow corruption operating in the capital city of a nation desperately trying to survive. Men walk past the soldier with small leather boxes bound tightly to their foreheads, their eyes fixed. He knows the temple system is broken, but Jesus does not stay in the desert. He does not retreat to a cave. He does not wait for a perfect, uncontaminated community. He walks right back into the center of the disease. He touches the bleeding. He eats with the traitors. The Essenes wait for a holy war to fall from the dry sky. But back in the crowded, screaming streets of Jerusalem, another group of men is entirely tired of waiting for heaven. They do not want to wash their hands in cold water. They want to bathe the streets in Roman blood. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 15, we find a list of the 12 men Jesus chooses to be his closest disciples, mixed in among the fishermen and the tax collectors. There is a man named Simon. Luke identifies him with a specific Greek title, Zelotes. The word translates a deep, ancient Hebrew concept. The Hebrew root is kana. It appears over 80 times in the Old Testament, and its range of meaning is intense. The noun translates as zeal, jealousy, or burning passion. It is the exact same word used in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. When God speaks from the smoke and thunder of Mount Sinai, firmly on the dirt to avoid acknowledging the pagan banners. Other men wear the expensive, imported linen of the local aristocracy, declaring, I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Elquana. That linguistic root changes everything about how you see these men, lurking in the shadows of Jerusalem. To be a zealot was not merely to be an anti-Roman political activist or a violent insurrectionist. It was a fierce, protective theology. For the zealots, paying taxes to Caesar was absolute blasphemy because it acknowledged another king over Israel. Their response to the military occupation was the sikha, a short, sharply curved iron dagger, hidden perfectly in the heavy folds of a woolen cloak. They would slip into a crowded festival, press the cold blade into the ribs of a Roman soldier or a compromising Jewish aristocrat, and melt back into the screaming crowd as the blood hit the cobblestones. Their violence was not a political strategy. It was an act of worship. If something about this historical tension is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So Jesus calls Simon the Zealot to follow him. He invites the sword-carrying revolutionary into his inner circle, asking him to walk beside a tax collector who works for the very empire Simon has sworn to destroy, stopping to share a polite laugh with the Roman guards. Miles away, out in the desolate, scorching heat of the Dead Sea Desert, they believe that if they light the match of rebellion, God will supply the fire of a holy war. They are convinced that the Messiah will be a military conqueror, a new King David riding out to establish the kingdom by force. But Jesus completely subverts the zealots' expectations. When the ultimate moment of crisis finally arrives in the crushing darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane, a sword is drawn. Peter strikes the servant of the high priest, severing his ear in the flickering torchlight. The violent rebellion is finally starting. Jesus commands the sword to be put away. He reaches out his bare hand, and he heals his enemy's torn flesh. He will not compromise like the Sadducees. He will not retreat like the Essenes. He will not kill like the Zealots. But there is one group left, and they are the ones who look the most like him. The sun drops behind the Galilean hills. A clay lamp is lit in a cramped stone house. Men gather around a rough wooden table. They do not wear the imported silk of the Sadducees. They do not hide the cold iron of the Zealots. They do not run to the scorching caves of the Essenes. They stay in the occupied villages. They stay in the crowded streets. A completely different group of men plunge themselves into freezing ritual baths, trying to wash away the spiritual contamination of the very city. They open the heavy leather scrolls. They read, they argue, they teach. These are the Pharisees. In Hebrew, they are the Perushim, the separated ones. The Romans have polluted the capital city. The Sadducees have completely compromised the high priesthood. But the Pharisees have a radically different strategy for national survival. They bring the temple into the living room. They declare every wooden dinner table a holy altar. They treat every family meal like a sacred temple sacrifice. They wash their hands with absolute mathematical precision. The water must pour just right over the skin. The dirt must be entirely rinsed away. They measure out exactly 10% of the tiny, fragrant leaves of mint and cumin growing in their window boxes. They guard the Sabbath with a fierce, unbreakable wall. The sun goes down on Friday, and all work stops. The heavy hammers are dropped. The grinding stones go quiet. The cooking fires burn down to ash. Holiness is not a distant temple ritual. It is a daily weapon. If the whole nation can keep the law perfectly, just for one day, they believe God will finally intervene. They believe in the resurrection of the dead. They believe in the unseen spiritual realm. They fiercely love the words of the prophets.